Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and I have a special guest with me, and I'm very excited. Sitting here with J.R. Vanhoose. How you doing, sir? Welcome to Kentucky History Podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man. This is I'm pretty excited. We were talking just a few minutes ago. Other than the Harry Potter audio, Kentucky History Podcast is on my Apple playlist. So yeah, I listen to you all the time.
Well, you come here for a special reason. You're a Paintsville, Johnson County native. You lived there your whole life, pretty much. Had some outs, I guess. You didn't live there when you're in college. We'll get to that later. But you're currently the head coach of Johnson Central. Assistant coach at Johnson Central, and most importantly for this show, history teacher, correct?
Yeah, I'm actually the head of the social studies department here at Johnson Central. So, but I teach. In the past, I've taught AP U.S. history, regular U.S. history. I've taught criminal justice. I've taught world history, and I'll be teaching a new class this year. It'll be AP Human Geography. So, yeah, I've taught middle school as well. I've taught middle school, 7th and 8th grade history. So, man, I've
you got it.
This for a long time. This will be my 19th year, so I can't believe I've been teaching.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you bring up all those history, or middle school and high school, and I always tell people I could never teach middle school because they all start getting taller than me. But you probably didn't have that problem, right?
And listen, people would tell me all the time, they're like, "How do you teach middle school?" And I actually like that age. I mean, they do tend to talk back a little bit, but when you're 6'9", it's not that often. So I didn't have as many problems, I guess, as some people would have. But yeah, man, I just love being in the classroom. Mm-hmm. I don't look to ever leave the classroom. People have always asked me, if I want to move to the board office or be a principal or anything like that. But no, I don't ever aspire to do that. I like being in the classroom, and I mean, shoot, where do you get to talk about history every day? I mean,
exactly.
You get paid to do it. I mean, it's a pretty fantastic gig.
Yeah. Let me ask you, this is just a teaching question. So that I know that, they do 5th grade Kentucky history or social studies, and we talk about Kentucky history and all that. Now, is there an 8th grade course for Kentucky history?
Yeah, well, when I taught middle school, and I'm sure it's probably the same, 7th grade was world history. Mm-hmm. 8th grade was U.S. history up to Reconstruction. Mm-hmm. And so now 11th grade juniors take U.S. history, and then that's like Reconstruction to, present day. Yeah. And then sophomores take world history. Again. And we offer a lot of things here at Johnson. We also have a dual credit U.S. history class where kids can take that and actually get college credit as well for the class. And AP, if you pass the AP test at the end of the year, you also get college credit. So I mean, we have a lot of pretty cool programs, not just in the history department, but overall here at Johnson Central.
So is there a way that we can get an established just Kentucky history course that everybody has to take?
Listen, I've been trying. I've been trying to get our administration just let me teach one. As an option. I would like to see it as a requirement.
That's what I'm thinking that needs to happen.
We like to. I think we, and I don't know how this will be taken, but I think we tend to over-test sometimes. With U.S. history. As far as juniors go, there's an end of the year test that they have to pass, and of course that's part of your school score. But and I understand that. I think people do need to understand American history, but I think with Kentucky history, I think it's really important to have the kids know where they come from, history of where they come from, and Kentucky is so different. Because you've got the Eastern Mountains, you've got the Bluegrass region, and then you've got Western Kentucky, and I think people need to understand the history of all those sections. Northern Kentucky, which is tied in with Louisville and Cincinnati, pretty highly, and all these different areas, the history and how people got here and why they settled in certain places, and I think our kids, especially in Eastern Kentucky, and I know I've heard it. Growing up, it almost felt like living in Eastern Kentucky was a negative thing. And I think our kids still get that. People make fun of the way we talk a lot of times. People still ask, you still you see all these shows, and especially crime shows. I'm into crime shows, and when they talk about Appalachia, whether it be Eastern Kentucky or whatever, I mean, they show some of the worst parts of the area. I mean, there's bad parts everywhere. Not just in Eastern Kentucky, but people think we still don't have shoes, and we're rednecks, and we live with our parents and marry our cousins or whatever. And I think our kids need to understand the history, especially of our area. That way they can go against those stereotypes and talk about our own rich history that we have here in Eastern Kentucky.
I agree with you. I've been asked about my accent plenty of times, and I've been from Rock Castle, not as near Eastern Kentucky as Johnson County, but having my wife from Perry County, you get
and what makes it funny for me is my mom is from Indiana. And so like when I go see my family in Indiana, sometimes they ask things about like what, can I say that again or slowly, and I'm just like, I think you all talk funny too. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's just I don't know. I didn't mean to go on that kind of tirade, but
that's all right.
I think especially as far as the Kentucky history class, if our kids could really understand just the rich history of the state and the area that we come from, Eastern Kentucky, I think that would make them feel a little bit prouder of growing up here and things like. And I'm sure it'll be stuff that we talk about in this episode as well. And so that's why I like doing these things. Kind of go against those stereotypes and rich history we have here.
Well, the importance of Kentucky to like the nation's history, and especially early on being founded and those sorts of things that a lot of people don't know about. I mean, there's so much things that's happened, and like you said, we'll get into a little bit of that here in this episode because Paintsville, John C.C. Mayo, we've talked about him. He, very important. Nobody knows about him hardly.
I think y'all had a whole episode about him, didn't you?
Yeah. Anyway, so Johnson County. Let's get into old Johnson County. It was the 97th county formed and is bordered by Morgan, Lawrence, Martin, Floyd, and Magoffin. I had the assumption, and it's just me, I was thinking it was right next to Pikeville, though, Pike County too. It just doesn't border it.
No, like Floyd County's to the south.
Yeah.
And then just on the southern side of Floyd County is Pike County.
There you go. And I've looked at the Kentucky map.
We're just like, really distance wise, we're a 40-minute drive from Pikeville.
Okay.
And so, it's, everything's closely related. When Johnson County was formed, it was actually taken from Floyd County.
Yeah. And
Floyd County, that was one of the first counties in Eastern Kentucky. It was the biggest.
Yeah.
And so, everything, everything is pretty small here as far as county size. And so things are a little bit closer than what people think, I believe.
Yeah. It's kind of like, the perception, I guess I would get is, it takes it takes us 2 hours just about to get to Perryville. And then they tell me that I've only been to Pikeville, I think once. And they're like, well, it's another, hour and a half from Perryville to Pike, or from Hazard to Pikeville, and you get that assumption that everything's just spread apart. But
it used to be. Especially in Eastern Kentucky. When and I know we'll probably go into a little bit more depth, but before the railroads came in, man, it took it would take a while just to get to some of the reaches of your county. And so I think people are still under that impression, like we don't have good roads in Eastern Kentucky and it's harder to travel. But, it's really, you can make a nice day trip visiting a lot of different places here in Eastern Kentucky.
Oh yeah, definitely. A lot of good scenery to check out. If you're of the hiking type or, anything like that, there's plenty to do. Now, Johnson County is named after Richard Johnson.
Richard Johnson,
former vice president of the U.S. Now, when was he vice president? Do you know that right off?
Oh my goodness, I think it was right before. Johnson County was founded. I think late 1830s, early 1840s, I believe.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, he's a Kentucky guy. He's from Scott County. And so I think, instead of, because I know they've named a lot of counties for legislators and governors and things like that. And so I guess, he was pretty popular at the time Johnson County was founded. So
Yeah.
there you
Well,
go.
That's another thing. Like, up until, I mean, this is on our tangent about Kentucky. Like, Kentucky's had, I'm trying to think, like 3 or 4 vice presidents. Lincoln was born in Kentucky. Zachary Taylor was from Kentucky. He wasn't necessarily, I don't think he was born in, well, I don't think he was born in Kentucky, but he lived in Kentucky for an extended time. Another thing, Henry Clay, you've got all these big political players on the national stage that, people just don't even know.
And people, I think people tend to forget that, especially about Abraham Lincoln. They're like, well, he grew up in Indiana and Illinois. Well, he was born, but he was born here. He was born here. Henry Clay. I mean, when you talk about, the early 1800s leading up to the Civil War, he was definitely a major player in national politics.
And,
and even Zachary Taylor, I think, I do think he was born in Virginia, but he lived in the Louisville area. But, his impact on American history as well, Mexican War and presidency. And so, I think people tend to forget, and again, that goes back to, when people say Kentucky, they think everybody in the state's backward and ignorant. We don't have any history, and so you have to educate people. People just don't understand that.
So the first, I guess, human occupation of Kentucky of Johnson County was the Adena culture, and this was discovered by the WPA. I believe they were they dug up burial mounds at Paint Creek, which is in Paintsville.
Back in the 1920s and 30s, they were getting ready to actually build a railroad station and rail yard here in Paintsville, and I believe when they found these burial mounds, I don't think they actually wanted to destroy them. And so the University of Kentucky came in and did some digs. There were 4 located from the mouth of Paint Creek south along the Big Sandy River, and then there was another one a little bit closer to town. But human settlement's been in Johnson County for a long time, and when I teach my kids, because we do a little bit of Kentucky history, Johnson County history, they're kind of surprised that there were burial mounds here, and because they read about that going on in other places. Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, and they're just like, well, why aren't there markers here? And I'm like, that's a great question. I don't have that answer for you. But the human settlement's been here for a long time, especially with the ancient Native Americans. It's something that I would love to do some more research on and love to know more about. But those burial mounds, as far as I know, the stuff that the archaeologists found are still housed somewhere at the University of Kentucky. But I would like to see those brought back, probably for a museum here in Paintsville, because again, that brings in that local history that a lot of people don't know about.
I agree. That would be. I don't know who we need to contact to get that done.
Yeah, me either. Me either. I mean, that and that's just me saying that. Maybe somebody from Paintsville's already tried, and maybe those artifacts no longer exist. I have no idea.
Well, another Native American group was I'm pronouncing this English, so I could very well be mispronouncing this, but the Totero. They lived in Johnson County, and they had a village near Hager Hill. I'm going to be saying some of these places. Hopefully they ring a bell to you.
Yeah, listen, Hager Hill is just, it's just a few miles, 2-3 miles from Paintsville.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, and again, and I'm sure you're going to talk about Dr. Thomas Walker. I mean, the reason Paintsville got its name, when Dr. Walker came through on his exploration, as he came down Paint Creek, the trees had been stripped to their bark so high, and Indians had painted animals in black and red paint on these trees and rocks and things. And so he named it Paint Creek. And so, but I mean, that just goes to show you that, there was some significance to this area. Yeah. For them to market with these paintings and have these burial mounds here and have different villages probably smaller villages, but set up in certain areas. And so, I'm sure the Big Sandy River played a part in, that because
Travel.
Paint Creek, runs into the Big Sandy just right here in Paintsville. And so, I'm sure it was a source of travel to the Ohio River and places beyond, and, things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting when you get into the Native American part of Johnson County, because, let's just say a lot of people don't discuss Native American history in Kentucky. When white settlement began, that's when they think history began.
Yeah.
And so I would say, and I'm sure I'm not speaking out of turn here, but a lot of the roads and things that were present were variations of Indian paths that were made through the years, and really how people got into this area.
Yeah, those roads, I mean, they kind of paved the way, no pun intended, but that's how people got around, the easiest path, and those were already kind of there.
Right.
And that's probably in most cases how Boone and the rest of them kind of followed those tracks. Yep. Well, and you say a lot of times people assume, and to an extent this is true, of course, that Kentucky was this friendly hunting ground. Everybody just came and hunted there, but there were at times settlements, and of course maybe more eastern Kentucky. There might not have been as much hunting going on from just like the Shawnee or whatever you want to go at, but this was a bit more of a permanent settlement. These people obviously had been there for a while.
I mean, I'm sure we can safely assume that Native Americans traveled through this area quite frequently.
Yeah.
Even if there weren't large settlements, they may have set up winter camps. And as far as I know, people still in Johnson County, whether on their own or accidentally, they will find arrowheads and things like that in certain places. And you can understand, it's usually along the flat land, located along some of these creeks and whatever that gets uncovered. And so, yeah, I mean, it's this was definitely an area widely traveled for sure by the Native Americans.
Yep. As you said, though, Thomas Walker, of course, came down Paint Creek, or what he named Paint Creek in the 1750s. Thomas Walker, he traveled quite a bit around old Kentucky. And then, of course, everybody assumes Boone was the first one, but Boone came a little later.
Yeah.
But the first permanent settlement, according to the Big Kentucky Encyclopedia, was in Blockhouse Bottom.
It was known as Blockhouse.
Blockhouse.
Yeah. Blockhouse Bottom, and that's kind of an interesting story. The gentleman who set up what was actually a block house, kind of like one of those small wooden forts.
Yeah.
His name was Matthias Harmon, and so it became known as Harmon Station. He set it up in the winter of 1787, 1788. His family lived in Virginia, but they would travel quite frequently, and they were supposedly associated with Daniel Boone as hunters, and so they built this place as kind of like a hunting station. When they would come hunt the area, they would stay here. But it became really prominent in 1790. There's a great story of a lady named Jenny Wiley, who was captured in an Indian attack in southwestern Virginia. The Indians, as they traveled to their villages, I believe in southern Ohio, of course, they came through eastern Kentucky.
Yeah.
And I won't go into the details of her travels, but she escaped somewhere just north of Paintsville, just a few miles outside of what is now Paintsville. Yeah. She escaped from her Indian captors. She wasn't sure how she was going to get back to Southwest Virginia, but she made a trek down a creek that is now called Jenny's Creek in Johnson County. And she made it to the Big Sandy River. Well, apparently she had this dream that there was a white settlement somewhere close by. Well, when she made it to the Big Sandy River, she was opposite of Harmon Station. And it just happened that the search party that had been sent out for her was there.
Oh, wow.
So as she was yelling at them across the river to come get her, they couldn't believe it. She had escaped. And so by the time she'd have made it across the river, the Indians had tracked her and they had lost her. And so she'd been rescued. And so she was reunited with her husband. And they actually, when they moved from Southwest Virginia, they actually moved to Johnson County. and
Oh, cool.
she is buried here. It's a great story.
Yeah.
I won't go into all the details, but
That one.
Harmon Station, Blockhouse Bottom.
Yeah.
There's a Kentucky road sign historical markers in the area. They talk about Jeannie Wiley. They talk about Blockhouse Bottom.
That sounds like Jeannie Wiley definitely is probably a podcast episode on its own.
Oh yeah, listen, man, you talk about a crazy story. I mean, they attacked this house where she lived. Her husband was gone at the time.
Yeah.
They end up killing some of her children in this attack. They capture her and a young baby. The young baby is killed on this voyage. She's kind of, in this limbo. They're taking her to these villages, probably to sell or, to whatever. And she escapes, man. That's definitely a podcast episode for sure.
And I think, did the Skags have something to do with her as maybe? Or
you know what? I'm not sure. They may have been associated with Blockhouse Bottom. Somehow I know like family names like Oxshire, Harmons. I'm not sure who was all with them when this rescue took place. But yeah, I mean, man, I probably got a book somewhere here in my classroom that it tells the story of Jeannie Wiley. Because I remember, like we talked about earlier, I remember being taught that in fourth and fifth grade, just because it was a local history and a segment, and she's buried here.
Yeah.
And so you can, there's historical markers where you can go visit the grave, where she's at, and so yeah, I mean it's a pretty interesting story for sure.
Yeah. Now, did you say Harmon Station? Is that what you?
Yes.
Yeah. So, was there any other stations? I mean, like, because I guess in compared to Lincoln County, you had Fort Logan, but then I mean you had probably 5-10 other stations within the county. It was just those small kind of fort structure, but
after Jeannie Wiley and everything took place, there was a trading station set up in what is now Paintsville. It was like Paint Creek Station, Paint Lick Station, something like it was named after Paint Creek. I believe it was Paint Creek Station. And that was really just a trading area because there were still Indians that came through the area, hunters and trappers. This is where they traded goods and things like that. But that is eventually what grew into Paintsville Creek Station. But that came probably 1794, 1795. So a couple years after Harmon Station had been established.
Yeah. So you mentioned, so Harmon Station, you got Paint Creek Station or trading place. What were some of the first settlers? What was I guess, if you were to say the founders of Johnson County, do you got names for those?
Well, the founder of Paintsville, his name was Henry Dixon. He was, he was the first person to build a home in what was now Paintsville. If I'm not mistaken, he came in from North Carolina.
Yeah.
About 1810, 1812. The station, the trading station was still here. But he bought land around it, what is now Paintsville, and began selling it off in certain, plats and properties. And so, I mean, the property where he lived is actually in town, and on that property is what is known as the Old Town Cemetery. It's no longer in use, but it was the first burial cemetery of town.
Yeah.
And he and his wife were buried there. There's a very nice monument, calls him the founder of Paintsville. And it wasn't long after that trading station was established that people began to move into this area, buy property, build their homes, and really that's kind of how Paintsville took off. Really, just the establishment of those homes, and then the laying out the property of Henry Dixon of the town. It just kind of took off from there. Yeah,
and that's typically how a county growth. And now to say Paintsville, of course, is the county seat of Johnson County. But that's kind of typically how it goes. Once one establishment is set up, the other ones come, and it spreads off.
And I'm sure it just it just attracted settlers who, like my family, for instance, the Vanhoose family. They had come to this country and lived in New York. Moved into Pennsylvania, and then traveled down the Shenandoah Valley into North Carolina. Well, about, I would say, I think around 1810, 1812, they took the New River Trail into what is now West Virginia. They lived in Cabell County, which is around Huntington. about 1815, they moved into the area. And from what I've read on that time period, people that continually moved west like that, starting to get crowded in the east. And so they were just looking for areas that, they could settle and have land and property. And so that's how my family got to Johnson County. I'm sure that's how many others got here.
Uh-huh.
They knew people from their areas back home who had moved here. They'd heard about the opportunity to buy land and large amounts of it. And so they began to come here. And once they had established themselves here, they no longer moved. They settled here. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I was thinking too, and this popped in my head, 1810, around that time, as far as Kentucky went, Kentucky's been a state for, almost 20 years. Native American attacks were down a lot in central Kentucky, but, in eastern Kentucky, they may not have even been as many. I guess I was thinking of settlement wise, they popped up all these stations in Lincoln County or Jefferson County to protect and kind of fortify against Native American attacks. But in eastern Kentucky, that might not have been as needed.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily a problem, especially once treaties had been signed. Yeah. And large amounts of land had been given to settlers in central Kentucky and towards western Kentucky, because the Jackson Purchase, I think, happened in 1818. So by 1820, there was no threat of Indians, especially in eastern Kentucky. And to be honest with you, I think people were moving in here knowing that there weren't going to be a lot of people moving into the mountains. A lot of people were going to central Kentucky, or those areas further west, to settle. And so the mountains, they essentially began to protect the people. And I think that's where we get, a lot of the negative connotations of people from eastern Kentucky. A lot of people just moved here just to have land and property, but the mountains kind of protect them from outside influences and outsiders coming in. And so these families began to grow, intermarry with each other. And so you have these large, essentially clans forming in eastern Kentucky. And, they become protective of each other and protective of towns and loyal to, all these interconnected people intermarried into their families. And so this became essentially their own territory here. They weren't getting influenced or getting pressure from other parts of the state because nobody was coming in here. People, they kind of realized that this was, I guess, a country into itself. Because, let's face it. It was hard to travel in the area. You've been to eastern Kentucky. These mountains, they tend to keep people out and keep people in. People that lived here tended to stay here, and the people that lived outside of eastern Kentucky, they didn't tend to move in here for any reason. So it essentially became a place where people began to be related to everybody. So you have these strong ties of loyalty and these family bonds that still last today. Yeah.
And thinking about the county's, geographical area, everybody assumes that it was eastern Kentucky. They assume coal, but up until, I would say, up until like the Civil War, but before the Civil War, Johnson County is formed. Coal was not the main economic source. People farmed. Timber, I assume, was probably quite. What other industry? What was the main industry?
There wasn't a lot of industry. It was very rural, agricultural. A lot of people farm, and that's probably because the population tended to stay pretty low in the area. There weren't a lot of people moving in, and so you just had these first generation, second generations growing up in eastern Kentucky, and they were doing what their fathers and grandfathers had done. They were farming the same land, probably acquiring new pieces of land to farm. And so, it was very rural, and even before the Civil War, there wasn't a lot of slavery here, especially in Johnson County. I think in 1860, there were just 27 total slaves in Johnson County. Yeah. Some of the other places, of course, some of the bigger counties had more. Slavery was an issue. It wasn't as prominent as it was in some other places in the state. But most of the time people farm. And I've heard stories and seen things where people that owned slaves, they were out in the fields working beside those same slaves, working on their farms, and because this wasn't a rich area.
No.
I mean, if you owned a slave, it was because you needed help on your farm. And we all know, I mean, I know slavery's wrong, and I have ancestors that were part of that institution, but it wasn't like there were large plantations here, large numbers of slaves on those plantations. People here farmed, and it was rural agricultural, and there wasn't a lot of industry.
That'll wrap up part 1 of our discussion with J.R. Vanhoose about the history of Johnson County. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.